Hello. Welcome everybody to today's edition of the F Word, Feminism and Sport. It's the penultimate event in the F Word series for 2015. My name's Maxine Beniba-Clark and I'll be your host for the evening. Before I introduce our panellists, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders past and present. So I'm really excited about this panel. You know, I think that in Australia, sport is an area in which we fight a lot of our equality battles. So I'm really thrilled that we've got a feminism panel on sport. Joining us today, we have Leisel Jones on the far end, and I think all of our panellists almost need no introduction. Leisel was born in Katherine in the Northern Territory, and she burst onto the swimming scene at 14, winning silver in the Sydney Olympic Games. Leisel and her mum were left bankrupt after her father left, and as a teenager, Leisel was the main breadwinner for the household. Along with Ian Thorpe, she holds the record for the most Olympic medals won by any Australian, as well as winning 7 world championships. She's regarded as the world's greatest female breaststroker. Leisel retired from swimming in 2012. She was a commentator for the 2014 Commonwealth Games and recently appeared on the Australian version of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
Yeah, my finest moment, thank you.
And she also has an amazing biography out, so we'll be talking a little bit about that today. Next we have Layne Beachley. Layne is widely regarded as the most successful female surfer in history, the only surfer, male or female, to claim 6 consecutive world titles from 1998 to 2003. Layne then went on to win a 7th world title in 2006 before retiring from the ASP World Tour in 2008. Layne is currently the chair of Surfing Australia, which is a recent appointment, and we'll be talking a little bit about that this evening as well. She is in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. She is an ISA Vice President, Director of her own charity, the Layne Beachley Aim for the Stars Foundation, which we'll also chat a little bit about this evening. She's a long-time ambassador for the Wyndham Vacation Resorts in the Asia Pacific, and she also supports several other charities and organisations, such as the National Breast Cancer Foundation, the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, Planet Ark, Surf Aid, Adopt Change, and Sunnyfield. A lot of charity work there.
You need to tell it.
You make us look bad.
I just need to tone it down.
And last but not least, we have Angela Pippos. Angela is a journalist, television presenter, radio personality, author, and MC. Angela can be heard on 774 ABC Melbourne and 891 ABC Adelaide, talking sport and life with Richard Stubbs and Michael Smythe. Her first book, The Goddess Advantage, 1 year in the life of a football worshipper, loosely follows her life during the 2005 AFL season. It's as much about love, loyalty, stuffed tomatoes, and Greek mythology as it is about the great game of Australian rules football. Her sharp, thought-provoking columns appear in the New Daily, Women's Agenda, and the Sunday Age. And we'll also talk a little bit about a new book that you're working on this evening as well. So please welcome our 3 panellists. So I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about girls and sport. You know, I feel like that's kind of a nice place to start when we're talking about feminism and sport. So I'm going to ask you, and I might start off with you, Angela, to cast your mind back to little Angela.
I'm still little. Maybe younger Angela.
Younger Angela. Below the age of 7, say. I mean, I know you come to sport from a different background as a commentator, and we'll talk a little bit later about your path into sports journalism. But were you a sporty kid as a girl under 7?
Absolutely, I was. But my own sporting career was cut short by a lack of talent and a lack of height.
Don't let that stop you.
Yeah, I was very sporty and very close, and still am close to my brother, and we played footy, cricket. He came to watch me play netball. And I believed at the age of 7 that I could represent Australia on the netball court. I knew I was short, but it didn't stop me from believing that I could do it. And it's a bit like that worldwide campaign, the Like a Girl campaign. I felt just like that at that age. You know, I wasn't aware of gender stereotypes. I was just out there doing it. And, you know, sadly, I didn't play for the Australian Diamonds, but I certainly spent a lot of my childhood playing sport, and boys existed just to play kick to kick with. And, you know, I wish I'd stuck to that general rule. Life would have been a lot easier. But that was my life, you know. Sport was everything. Sport and horror films, that was my childhood.
Yeah.
What a classic combination. Because unlike you, Angela, before I was 7 years old, you believed that you could have played netball for Australia. I believed I was going to be a world champion in every sport I played. So I had much greater aspirations. Maybe that was it. It was the self-imposed limitations that stopped you.
Perhaps. Yes. Well, I wanted to be the country's first woman Prime Minister, so I was aiming high.
You were.
In the political sphere. Please, that didn't happen.
I'm sure Julia is too.
So, Layne, you grew up in Manly, and were you always drawn to the sea? Was surfing something that you were involved in under the age of 7 at all? Or?
Yes, I actually remember being plonked on Manly Beach before I could walk. So obviously a few months old, and I was actually adopted into a beach-loving family with the last name Beachley and became a pro surfer. So it was a very fortunate twist of fate.
Yeah.
And so my dad was a surfer. Actually, he's a clubby down at Manly Surf Club. He still gets up at 76 years of age. He still gets up at 5 o'clock every day and runs the length of Manly Beach. So he's an avid surf lover. He's an avid beach goer, and he lives within 100 metres of the beach. So I just grew up with that natural affinity and love of the ocean. And for a self-confessed control freak, I'm so drawn to the ocean because it teaches me to relinquish control. It's a force so much more powerful than me. So when I go into the water from an early age, and I still surf or at least enter the ocean every single day, I still feel that sense of centeredness and groundedness and nurturing and acceptance when I go into the water. It just rinses my mind, body and soul. So I know that's where that natural attraction comes from. But I started surfing when I was 4. I started skateboarding when I was 3. The ocean's a lot softer to fall in. So I started surfing when I was 4, and I started paddling out the back on my own by the time I was 5 years old. And between 4 and 5, I was surfing the ferry wake on Manly Harbour. I was dominating that corner. And then I owned Manly South Stane Corner on a foamy up until I was about 9 or 10 years old, and then I started to expand on my horizons and think that maybe a professional surfing career might be my next profession. But needless to say, my school teachers weren't agreeing with me. Lock up her surfboard, it'll amount to nothing. I love proving people wrong, especially school teachers.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, my experience as a youngster with sport was not great. I was pretty much asked to leave my netball club because I was too uncoordinated. They said to my mum, don't bother with tennis because you're wasting your time and your money because she's too uncoordinated. And I did gymnastics, but I was too big and too awkward, so they said, no, don't bother with that either. So the only one left is swimming, so I may as well stick with that one. So I just happened to be good at it, and yeah, I'm pretty hopeless at most land-based things, so I'm not in a good position now because I do everything on the land, and I'm just really hopeless. So my poor PT, he's just really, I have to deal with this. He used to be so good at something, so I'm pretty hopeless. So
How do you go with kettlebells?
I'm not bad, actually. I haven't dropped any, so that's
well
good.
done.
But I'm actually all right. I just ball sport's not good. Balancing not good, just swimming was my thing, and
Very good at swimming.
Very luckily, I would have been absolutely screwed if I didn't have that. So, but the same thing with the water, it just was my friend.
There's been a report that was released recently in the UK that came out of the UK Government Equalities Office, where they interviewed 8-year-old girls about sport, and what they found was that under the age of 8, girls, there's no difference in confidence in terms of sport, there's no difference in self-esteem. Girls are willing to play any sport. But once they got to kind of grade 3 and they interviewed the girls, they kind of started to say, girls can play netball and they can do swimming and they can do dancing and all of the sports that for boys were outdoor things, you know, so cricket, softball, and it's just kind of coming from the kids themselves. So I'm interested to know, like around that 9 or 10 age, did any of you kind of experience a shift in the way that you viewed sport or viewed your relationship to sport? I'll start with you, Angela.
Well, my ideas about equality were set at a very young age. I didn't realise at the time that I think the girl that I was at 8 is really the woman I've become. I'm fighting for equality because I want the Australian sporting landscape to be a bit like my early childhood, where I was encouraged to play any sport that I wanted, and my sporting pursuits were as valuable as my brother's. You know, and this was, at the time, I didn't realise how powerful that was, but I sort of carry that notion around in my head, and that's the way it should be. I guess I didn't have access to some of the sports that girls have access to today. It pretty much was, you know, netball and softball. You know, I was never offered the opportunity to play soccer. I wish I had. You know, girls' cricket wasn't really happening when I was young. I'm a bit older than I know. I'm definitely older than Leisel. And we're probably the same age, I think.
Okay.
No, I know we are.
Yes, we are.
But, you know, I didn't feel any barriers were there. But as, you know, I became a teenager, a lot of my girlfriends dropped off playing sport. They got involved in other things. Whereas I was kind of the dream teenager for my parents because I just continued to play sport and, you know, I didn't really sort of get distracted by other stuff in society until much later. But I certainly felt invincible at a young age. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of psychology around what happens around that 6 to 8 year old age group, and by the time you're between 0 and 6, you're actually in a theta brainwave state. So you're actually just absorbing and learning, and you're open to everything. You have no filter to judge or criticise. And then once we get past 6, all of a sudden we have the mental faculty or capacity to start judging, criticising, comparing, determining whether that's right for us or not. And once you start comparing, then you start feeling a sense of inadequacy or you're not good enough, and then you start to absorb all of the lessons or the things that you read and the things that you see, and there's people telling you you're not good enough. So you actually have to have the real sense of self and a sense of clarity about what you want to do. And I was very fortunate that when I was 8 years old, I established that clarity because my dad sat me down when I was 8 years old and told me I was adopted. And it's a quite late age to be told that, and it had a monumental impact on my life because it made me make a choice, basically. Do I become a victim of my circumstances, or do I choose to do something positive with this? And it was at 8 years old that I decided I'm going to be a world champion. Now, a lot of it was subconscious. I didn't think, okay, I'm a victim, and so now I'm going to become a world champion. I just thought, you know what, to do something positive with this, if I become a world champion, then I'll be deserving of love. And that's essentially what drove me. So at the time, I was playing cricket, tennis, soccer. When I was 10 years old, there was boys coming around and knocking on my best friend's house who had a twin brother, and the dad would answer the door and he's like, oh, you're looking for Tim? And he said, no, we're looking for the girls. Because we were really valuable team players, and we were fast and we were athletic, and so we actually played more sport with the boys than we did with the girls. We grew up as tomboys, and I had the benefit of, even though I lost my mother when I was 6 years old, I still grew up in a real tomboy and inclusive environment. And I heard Eva Cox on the ABC a couple of weeks ago with Richard Feidler, and she said feminism isn't about the exclusion of men, it's about the inclusion of women and making it okay for women to participate and educating women that those limitations that are put onto us by society and those projected expectations are choices that we make, and actually we can defy those by choosing to do something different. And so I was really fortunate that I grew up in a very inclusive environment. My older brother surfed, so I surfed. My dad surfed, so I surfed. And I was surrounded by a lot of men that were were inclusive and supportive. So for every guy that I encountered that was really intimidating or threatening or hostile, I always had that support network of people that were supportive and encouraging and believed in me. So it all comes down to the kind of people that you surround yourself with, and then also based on the value that you have for yourself. So as an 8, 9 and 10-year-old, yes, I was pursuing every sport: cricket, tennis, soccer, hockey. Unlike you, I was good on land. And I loved playing sport because it gave me a place where I felt like I belonged and I could express my individuality and express my energy, because I was such a hyperactive tomboy. And so I felt that sport was actually where I truly belonged and something that I truly valued. So I didn't allow all those external pressures and expectations and people telling me, you're a girl, you can't play that, to define whether I could or I couldn't. Now, once again, that was a real subconscious mindset, but it just came down to me having that conviction and belief in myself to continue to pursue that.
Yeah, I think at the age of 8, that's a really crucial time where women and girls, choose what sports they want to do or whether they want to do sport at all. And you do see a lot of girls dropping out at that age. Luckily for me, I liked all sports, and mine was never a case of, even though my mum must have been told I wasn't good at it because I thought I was awesome at all of them. But that was the age where the other sports just fell away. Like, it wasn't a case of, oh, I'm not going to do that sport because I'm not good at it. It was just I was better at swimming. And so all my friends were at swimming. I had great relationships when I was at swimming. So, and the boys that I liked did swimming. So that was a natural choice for me. So I was going to go, well, the boys have hotter bodies, so I'm going to go into that sport. So no, but I think for me, it was just purely, I never judged myself that I wasn't good at anything, and I still don't do it now. Even with anything, I'll give it a go. If I look like a fool, that's completely fine. But yeah, it's all about that time where you're sort of discovering, women, young girls are now going, oh, I'm not so good at that, I don't want to do it. But also too, luckily with swimming, it's very much a male-female sport all the way through. It's not a women's hockey team or a men's hockey team or women's cricket or men's cricket. We're the Australian swim team and we're men and women together. So luckily for me in that situation, it's very much even. The equality is not quite even, but the sport itself is pretty even.
And Angela, you had a very interesting entry into sports journalism. You studied politics at university.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you fell into sports journalism and how that was to be a young woman going into that field?
Yes, well, I have an honours degree in politics, from the University of Adelaide, and my plan was to become a political journalist, go to Canberra. Somewhere on that road to Canberra, I ended up in Melbourne. But I was
sensible choice.
Yes. I'd rather be at the MCG than in Parliament House, especially at the moment. But I always loved sport, but I didn't think it would be my profession. Okay, so what happened when I joined the ABC in Adelaide, I was wanting to cover politics, but there were a number of times that there wasn't a sports journalist in the newsroom, so they'd send me out to cover the sport because I knew the rules of cricket and golf and, lawn bowls, whatever sport I understood it. So the more sport I covered, the less politics I did. And then the boss in Melbourne said, come on over, we'd like you to work here. And, and Greg Miles was presenting at the time. He'd left and went into racing full time, and I got the job at the desk, and it became so much fun that I never looked back. I never looked back at going into politics until the Labor Party gave me a phone call in 2007 and said, have you thought about a career in politics? We will offer you the seat of Williamstown, a 20% safe seat, which I knocked back. But yeah, sport's just been great for me. There have been many challenges. I'm sure we're going to get onto those later. But it's been a mostly rewarding and stimulating career, but it has had a few hurdles along the way.
Why'd you knock it back?
Well, I was single at the time, and I just felt like I wasn't ready to go into politics.
Are you ever ready to go into politics?
Maybe not.
Just checking.
It was just that it was a timing thing. Maybe I'll look at doing that at a future date, but also the way that the whole thing unfolded over a 3-day period, I felt rushed into making my decision, and I wasn't quite ready to make it to suit the party's timeline. So I took the old no, I'll say no for now option.
Cool. Layne, when you became involved in competitive surfing, kind of, at mid-teens, did you? I mean, you were surfing sometimes in the male heats. Was there fighting for waves? What's the culture like out there on the water, and how did you deal with that as a teenager?
Well, I had a variety of experiences both on the land and in the water. So there was a lot of hostility in both areas, especially for a young girl called Gidget, who had grand aspirations to be a world champion and was willing to declare those aspirations to anyone that would listen. And I was never backwards and coming forwards in what I wanted. And so when I grew up in Manly, which is the most appropriately named beach in the world, by the way, I was the only girl surfing down the southern end of the corner of the beach. And I identified that the better surfers were up where the better waves were. And for me to improve, I have to continue to expand on what my capabilities are. To do that, I have to step outside of my comfort zone. Therefore, I need to go and surf where the better waves are and the better surfers are. That means stepping off my foamy and jumping on a fiberglass surfboard. I was leaving the comfort zone of the corner that I owned for so long. And when I went up there, I encountered a lot of negativity and hostility in the form of, you're a girl, get out of the water, or you shouldn't be out here, you need to go back in and watch my towel. Just stupid comments, right? And so whenever I got the, you're a girl, get out of the water, I just look back at the boys and go, what are you doing out here then? They didn't like the fact that I stood up for myself, but what gave me that sense of conviction and the confidence to do so was the clarity of vision of wanting to become a world champion and realising that to do that I'm going to have to continue to expand. The other challenge was the old mentality or the way that people perceived women surfing. And I'll never forget this time, I was about 17 years old. I had announced that I'm joining the Pro Tour. I've just completed my HSC. And one of my friends who I had a deep, profound respect for, he was the head of the lifeguards at Manly Beach. He's known me since before I could walk. The first thing he said to me when I said I'm about to join the tour, his first response was, don't become a lesbian. Oh. And I thought, is that the best you can do? Is that how you perceive women surfing? That they're just a bunch of dykes? And the only sensible advice that you can give me before I'm about to embark on achieving my dream of becoming a world champion is to not become a lesbian. That just really disappointed me. It bitterly disappointed me. And so
actually, what if you did turn out to do that?
I know.
Good for you.
I know, right?
All power to you.
I know. And at the time, the women's tour was flooded with lesbians. But
you had so many pickings, like really fit women.
I did. But I had
awesome.
There was
smorgasbord.
Much hotter men, like the swimmers.
True,
right?
true,
Have you
true.
seen surfers' bodies?
Yes, they are amazing, and they're more tanned because they're outside more.
Yes, and they wear board shorts, and that's it. So yeah, hence I followed men's surfing primarily.
Yeah.
But anyway, regardless of that, it saddened me that the perception of women surfing was that. And so I did everything that I could to change it. Fortunately, there was a young American girl on the tour called Lisa Anderson who became the golden girl of women surfing because she broke down those stereotypified mentality or perceptions of men. So she surfed with beauty and grace and style. She embraced her femininity. She embraced her sexuality. She actually said to Quicksilver, I want board shorts that girls can surf in. And it was her mentality, it was her desire to do that created Roxy. And now it's $1 billion company. So it's something just so simple. And we think, especially as women, that we think to create or instigate any kind of impactful change that it has to be a monumental mind shift. And it really doesn't. It just has to be the conviction and the belief and the confidence to stand up for yourself and say, you know what, that's not right. I don't agree with you. And you know what? Why I don't agree with you is because I'm going to disprove your comment by showing you how many beautiful women there are out there that aren't lesbians, that are successful. And regardless of their sexuality, regardless of their preference, it makes no difference to if you're going out there and performing to your best and actually pursuing a dream and inspiring others as you do it, then who cares what your preference is? Just make it okay for others to do it.
How do they treat you now? Like in terms of surfing, obviously you're very well respected. How are you perceived now?
A lot differently. Yeah, there's
That's
times.
good.
Yes, it
That's
is.
good.
So I've been out of the water with an injury for the last 2 months, and I paddled out two days ago for my first surf, or 3 days ago for my first surf. It's like reconnecting with my life force. I'm like, oh my God, I'm alive.
Back to the mothership.
Yes, exactly. Beam me up. And when I got out there was a couple of local guys, and they basically said, have you been away? Where have you been? And I thought, well, thank you for acknowledging my absence. I never expected them to. I've still got this deep-seated belief that women aren't welcome in the water. So you tend to seek proof of what you believe, right? And I love it when the guys disprove my beliefs and acknowledge that they respect having me in the water. They enjoy having me. They missed me. Yeah, and they enjoy surfing with me, and it makes them step it up, because no guy wants to be outshone by a girl, right?
Totally.
So, and I surf better than most of the guys in the lineup, and I pride myself on that. So I do still encounter the heroes, the ones that like to drop in on me just to prove to themselves that they're better than me only by cutting me off.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
And I laugh at that. I think that's hilarious and wildly entertaining. I love it when the guys feel a little bit of intimidation by me. It's good.
Speaking of respect in the water, I'm going to give you a quote, which is actually from an article from the Griffith Review. It's a great article, which I think you were interviewed for, Layne. It's called, "Is It Hard to Surf with Boobs?"
I wouldn't know.
But the quote, which is actually something that a female surfer was asked in 2011 by a surfing magazine, for the women's issue of a particular surfing magazine. But the quote I'm going to direct is to Leisel. Part of this article says, historically, when sport arrived as an organised social phenomenon with the Industrial Revolution, women's bodies were judged to be too unsuitable and inferior to take part. As the founder of the modern Olympics, Baron Pierre de Coubertin opined in 1896, no matter how toughened a sportswoman may be, her organism is not cut out to sustain certain shocks. Women have been striving to combat this view ever since.
Have they heard of childbirth? Seriously.
Absolutely.
Are you kidding? Like, the female life force is like designed to give birth. Like, if that's not a shock to the system, I haven't given birth, and it terrifies the absolute hell out of me.
It actually made a baby start crying.
That's
at
right,
the
I
baby
know.
room.
The child was like, I'm sorry, Mum, I'm really sorry. But if we can't withstand pain, like, that's just crazy. I mean, our bodies are so made for sport, just as much as men, if not more, because our pain threshold is generally a lot higher. So, I mean, I can't talk because I don't have boobs and I don't surf, so I can't comment on that comment. But I think it's crazy. I mean, to think that sport was made for men who have a much lower pain threshold than women typically. I mean, got to push a watermelon out of a very small hole, and so I mean that's
Thank you for that visual.
Yeah, you're welcome. You can see why I'm terrified, but it's just crazy to think that anyone could think that a female's body is not made for sport physically.
It's the myths and assumptions and preconceived ideas about women and sport. It is so boring. They just keep women in boxes.
They keep going back to the same comments.
It's the same old stuff, and it's tiring. It's like the comment you heard before you went on the tour. We are surrounded by these comments every day, and the most important thing is, and Layne touched on it, is you have to call it out. You've got to call it out, because if you don't, it's just going to continue. And I've reached a point, I'm now starting to get really angry. I've reached a point in my career where I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of waiting for change. There has been change, but really it's been as slow as continental drift, and it's time now to get things moving. Graham Corns in Adelaide was talking about how can women play AFL because they've got boobs. I mean, the whole boob comment and everything, it's just, it's 2015.
Absolutely.
And it's calling out sexism. It's, we have to stop comparing men's and women's sport. It's something else that I bang on about all the time. Let's celebrate both. They're both fantastic. They're, equally worthy. And, I guess... And I don't want to sort of move on to something else that you might raise later, but in my own career, I now feel strong enough. I've got enough runs on the board to start talking about this. I felt a little bit nervous about it when I was in the throes of my journalism career. How would I get a job on a commercial network if I start talking like this? Now I don't care. I just think it's really important that we look at the sporting landscape and we think about our daughters, whether we've got them or not, and think about the sort of future we want for them. And it's all to do with those myths and assumptions from that to that, and I'm sure we'll raise others as the hour goes on.
Absolutely. And Leisel, you started out in the Olympics at 14. What was that like in terms of, growing up in the spotlight, growing up in a swimsuit? You've written about it beautifully in your co-written book, which I'm hoping everyone will grab tonight. But, at 14 to suddenly be thrust into the spotlight.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. I had to pick the worst sport with the least amount of clothing. At least I could have picked something with a nice outfit. But
have you seen what the surfers are wearing?
Yeah, I know. They're actually pretty good now. They've got good wetsuits now.
No, I'm talking about the bikinis.
Oh, the bikinis. Yeah, that's right. They are much better. But
no, there's
that's
a lot
even
less
skimpier.
Of it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So luckily that wasn't me, because I definitely don't have a bikini body. I have a body and I go to the beach in a bikini, but I don't have a bikini body. But yeah, it's really hard. At the age of 14 to be on TV, it's such an icky age. Like, it's any 14-year-old will tell you it's just awful. Your skin's all funny. I was very lucky I didn't have acne, and your teeth are all crooked and all that sort of stuff, and I had to do that in the public eye, and I was still figuring myself out, who I was, what I was about, what I stood for, what I believed in. And so I'm doing this very publicly, and at points being criticised for the pressure that I put on myself to perform and to win, and that was really hard. That's a really hard lesson to learn, particularly at that age. So 15 is such a big stage in your life where you learn so much about yourself, and I was doing it very publicly. So I wouldn't advise it to anyone, but I learnt much more about myself than I would have if I'd just gone to school or had just been average at what I did.
So if you could go back to that age right now and give yourself some advice, what would you say to yourself?
Dye your hair, girlfriend, because it's not good. No.
Oh, come on.
No. No, I think just be more me. I think I just wish I was more me. I was very innocent and naive when I first started, and it shows in any media answers that I've provided, and then I just became really jaded. I just became really forced, and the answers I gave were very structured and very correct, and I never gave my opinion on anything because you got criticised for it. So I would definitely, from 15 onwards, I would be more honest with myself and be more honest with the public about who I really was, because I found I became a very, very plain person, which is so not me. So,
no, certainly not.
So not.
And were male swimmers hearing these questions about body image or not?
No, not at all.
No.
Never. No. The way they look or their skin folds is never brought up. We used to be weighed at least once a week in front of everybody. And you have to write it down on a chart, which everyone can see. We had comments such as 6120, which stands for FAT in the alphabet. We had really shocking things, but all directed at women, nothing at the men. If they bulked up, that was great, fantastic, good for you, but you didn't have to document it on a chart for everybody to see.
Did anyone call that out?
No, I think we were probably too scared at the time because they came from male coaches, and coaches were to be respected. And, back when I was 14, this is when I was a lot older and not coaches directly with me, but to hear those sort of comments, you can't call them out. You're an 18-year-old athlete. You can't really backchat and go, hey, that's not acceptable. You can't say that about us. You just sort of cop it on the chin. And it's not right. You can't do that to young athletes and females in particular.
How did that affect you mentally when you were swimming?
Horrible. If your skin folds, and I was speaking to girls at the MLC today, and they said, oh, but you got weighed. What happens if your skin folds went up? I said, look, they did all the time. You would just bawl your eyes out the whole session that your skin folds had gone up, and they could go up 1 or 2, but that was devastating. And if your weight wasn't dropping enough, there was so much focus on it, ruined the whole session. You may as well go home.
Have you noticed a difference, Angela, in the way that women are reported on in sports as opposed to male athletes at all as a commentator?
Yeah. The casual sexism. There's the overt sexism, the sort of, unequal pay, lingerie football league. There are things that sort of scream sexism at you, but there's also an undercurrent, and it's a casual sexism. It's the, asking the tennis player to do a little twirl. that tennis commentator, he's a great guy. He's not sexist, but he is saying something without really thinking about it, because it has, as the former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick would say, it's gender asbestos. It's kind of everywhere. In sport, it's everywhere. It's in the gym. It's in the training. It's everywhere. Yeah. And you start to think and say things without really noticing what you're saying. So that's what I think happened there. But yeah, double standards are rife. We could get into the Matilda's pay situation. The Australian cricketers have received a $70 million windfall, and none of that money is going to our women cricketers because they haven't signed a memorandum of understanding. So because of that, they don't get access to any of that money. If the blokes handed over 2 million of that 70 million, their salaries would double, just if they just handed over 2 million. But because there's some discrepancy about, whether the word player in the MOU means just blokes or women as well, they're not going to get any of that money. So look, there's just so much of that going on. And, once again, you have to fight. And I applaud the Matildas for standing up, not just for more pay, but they made it about respect. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a test case for women in sport in this country, because it's about more than pay. It was about having access to a high-performance environment. Mm-hmm. It was about a pathway for girls. It was about respect. And, I think you can't really argue against that. They're not a bunch of greedy women wanting more pay. They weren't even on the minimum wage. So I think they've done us all a favour, and we need to see more of that. We need to speak out more.
Layne, during your reign as World Surfing Champion, you were a women's advocate in various surfing competitions. That involved, advocating for surf time and for a whole heap of other things. Yes. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I sat on the board of directors of the Association of Surfing Professionals for 15 years. So essentially I was the director of the women's tour while I was competing and winning world titles. So it was quite challenging because I'd sit in board meetings for 6 or 10 hours sometimes, and I was literally sitting opposite 3 stakeholders who were the marketing directors of Rip Curl, Quicksilver and Billabong, and asking them for greater pay or more opportunity. And their mentality was, well, if we pay you more, we'll have to pay the guys more. So we don't want to pay the guys more, so we just won't pay you more. And so it was quite challenging. And then also, when we were competing alongside the guys, that their mentality was, well, you're girls, you don't deserve good conditions. And so we used to have to fight just to surf in quality waves. Now, I must admit, this is all generational, and all of these current perceptions and projections are generational, and this can change, and it is changing, which is great, because from the generation that I surfed in and my predecessors and what they endured, I mean, they were competing for $500 total. I was competing for $30,000 total between 18 of us. Now the women are competing for, I think they can win. Stephanie Gilmore, if she wins every event this year, she will earn more money in 1 year than I earned in 20 years on tour. Wow. So we're seeing a dramatic shift in the changes and dramatic shift in their level of respect and recognition and support, especially in women's surfing. I'm seeing a great good news story in women's surfing because the governing body has been taken over by a whole bunch of guys, and the guy who's funding it, his wife's just picked up surfing, so he's now all about women's surfing. So all the attention's going into the women, and the men are like, hang on. I'm like, no, you've got enough. You guys are right. The girls need a little bit more support. So they're getting a lot more press, and they're getting a lot more monetary support. They're getting greater events. And the WSL, the World Surf League, are actually funding events even if they don't have the sponsors to put the events on. So they're giving the women greater opportunities. So
you've played a role there.
I have definitely created the platform for that, absolutely, because as you said, I was an advocate for women. I was an advocate for women's surfing. I believe that as women, it's our responsibility to make it okay for the future generation to do it too. As Anne Sherry said the other morning, as now she's the the most influential woman in Australia, she's saying that it's actually up to other women to break down those barriers, because I believe in this too. I tend to believe that women don't believe they can achieve something until they see another woman do it first. And so it's up to other female pioneers to make sure that they're creating that developmental pathway for other women to step into that and pursue it with much more vigour and much more opportunity. I staged the richest surfing event in the world for 7 years because I wanted women to be able to earn equal pay. And no surfing industry was allowed to sponsor it. No surfing industry company. I actually disallowed it. And it made it a lot more challenging than it needed to be. But I had grand visions for what I wanted women's surfing to be. And I think the biggest mistake that we can possibly make as women is to be too impetuous about it. We've got to be patient, and I understand where the Matildas and the Southern Stars and the Diamonds are coming from, but they also got to understand that the men have been playing the game for a lot longer, and therefore they've created that generational support. And so the women have to keep at it, keep calling it out, keep pursuing it, keep demanding more, but be patient in the fact that things are going to change, and they're changing slowly, but they are changing.
Mm-hmm. Too slowly.
Yeah. And Leisel, you've done a fantastic job of advocating for young female swimmers in your book, Body Lengths. For you, what needs to change in terms of women swimming and supporting those up-and-coming young girls to become champions and have a different experience to the one you had?
Yeah, this equal pay thing, it's something that I speak to my partner all the time, and it is really hard. I mean, the equal pay thing is something I faced myself. I've won the same amount of medals that Ian Thorpe has won at an Olympic Games, and I've probably been paid about maybe a tenth of what he's been paid. So, I mean, and the only way I can get ahead in that sense is to take my clothes off. That's the only way, to strip off for men's magazines or whatever it is. And I mean, there's big offers for those sorts of things, but I wasn't willing to do it. So, I just wanted to stand up for that. But in the book, I just really wanted to raise all the issues that I had throughout my swimming career as a lesson for other people to learn from. That, we still deal with mean girls on a daily basis. We still deal with body image issues like everybody else does. We deal with self-esteem issues, all those sorts of things. And I wanted to highlight that in the book and show that we go through that, and we're trying to be the best in the world. We're not invincible. We've got to stop the hate between women. We've got to stop this criticism. Like, it's getting to the point where it's ridiculous. And I look at Instagram and people's comments. I just think we've got to stop the hate between women. We've got to really start supporting each other, really encouraging each other, because it's getting really tiring. So in the book, I made a point of that. And every story that I've written was not a negative story about anybody else, but it was how I perceived it and how I reacted to it, and wanted the lesson that people can learn from it and how to react to it. Mm-hmm. So I've put all the stories in there. So I just wanted a positive change for women, particularly in sport, but more so in life.
Mm-hmm. And Angela, you're also working on a new book that is about women in sport. Do you feel that women sports writers have a role to play in terms of, changing that culture of reporting on women differently and exposing some of these stories?
Yes, but I think we all have a responsibility to do it. And the problem in the media is not so much with the journos. Most of us in sport believe in equality, but it's the decision makers at the networks who choose, and TV's my area of expertise. We have a dedicated 24-hour AFL channel without one woman offering up an opinion about the sport. They're reporting, but how many panel shows are there? 57 different panel shows. They're all wearing pastel shirts. But there's not one woman sitting there offering up an opinion. And it may not be a different opinion to some of the blokes, but it is, it's diversity, and we should be celebrating diversity and embracing it. So I get really upset about the decision makers being out of touch with society, because I MC a lot of events, and I MC events for the Collingwood Football Club. And I've never had an issue, and no one in the crowd has ever had a problem with me talking about AFL. And there's a cross-section of life in that audience, and they're completely fine with me banging on about football. So where is the problem? I'm not I'm not feeling it in the crowd. I'm just sensing that the decision makers think they know what people want, and therefore we've got to have all these blokes sitting there looking the same age, same story, same background, talking about sport. And when you do that, and the Adam Goods story emerges, that's why you get that sort of response, because the diversity is not there on the panels. So my feeling is that I'm a glass half full kind of person, despite the fact that I'm a bit upset tonight about things not moving fast enough. But thankfully I'm a born optimist, and I'm getting a lot of encouragement from, the public about what they want to see. And they don't really have a problem with women in the media talking about sport. I think, from my experience, the problem is higher than that.
Okay. And on that optimistic note, we might throw it open to question time. Don't be shy. Please raise your hand if you have a question. We have a mic on either side of the stage.
Thanks. I'm really enjoying it, guys. Really, really good. Angela, I just have a question for you. So there's a bit of stuff going on at the moment with young women commentating on YouTube about certain sports. And in particular, I watched one recently about a woman in the US who commentates on NFL, and it's hugely popular video where she's discussing some of the issues around domestic violence and women's rights and players from teams that are not getting kind of expressed in mainstream media. What's your thoughts on that, and also what's your thoughts on YouTube as a medium for other young women to speak up about these particular issues, especially in sport?
Social media is great for women, for getting their voice heard, absolutely. It can also be a dangerous place and space for opinions. Not all of them are pleasant. But you look around the world and there are women commentating in, NBA, UFC. There's a woman hosting UFC. I mean, other sports get it right. And you'd have to think when it comes to mixed martial arts, there ain't a tougher sport out there than that. And they have been able to not only, invite women to take part, Ronda Rousey, etc., but to give them equal
first woman
billing.
On Men's Fitness or Men's Health magazine.
Yeah, but she is given equal billing. It's amazing that they've come from that. When the head of the UFC famously said no woman will ever take part in the UFC, a matter of 2 or 3 years later, they are given equal billing, which is great. I think we can learn a lot from other sports codes from around the world. And I think a good entry point is, as you said, this YouTube. And that's where you're going to get diverse opinions and also people who aren't afraid to talk about the culture of sport. See, here, once again, it's a bit like me when I was on a commercial breakfast radio show for a couple of years, breaking barriers and doing all of that. But I felt quite inhibited, and I had to sort of leave my feminism sort of at the door of the studio a lot of the time and couldn't bring it in with me for fear of, all the nasty stuff that I would cop. I think we've got to be better at talking about the culture of sport in this country. Absolutely.
Okay. Do we have another questioner? Don't be shy.
We don't bite. Hard. There's one right at the back.
I got asked a good question today. Do you like mermaids? Yes, I love mermaids. From a Year 3 student.
That's random.
It's a great question.
That's awesome.
So feel free to ask that.
Well, we've got the answer already. We don't need to answer.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could comment a bit on how you see the reflection of a lack of female coaches. And I know that Leisel spoke about it a little bit, but whether or not there's a lesson that we can learn around some of the business and cultural expectations about women's leadership and strategy, and how that's translating and changing in sport in Australia.
Yeah, I think particularly in swimming, I think we can count on one hand how many female swimming coaches there are. They provide a very unique insight. They can be quite a lot tougher than the male coaches as well. They can be a really good ear to listen. Like they listen to your problems, they get it, they understand. And particularly for young women, I think that's a really crucial age. That's 12, 13, 14 age, where I think a woman coach could be just so much more influential and understanding and maybe a little bit more private about a few things. And this is why in sort of the last 6 months or so, I've thought about going back into the sport in sort of a mentoring role, not necessarily the coaching, 5 a.m. starts, I like my sleep-ins now, but just more in a mentoring role and just a listening role. And I mean, Layne, you've done athlete liaison officer at the Olympics, and and you know, that's such a great role, and particularly for a female, in that very listening ear, non-judging, and for women to be able to speak to another woman at that age, I think is very crucial. So I think we can see a lot more female coaches on pool deck, which is very much a man's world and very hard to compete with them, but I think we need to see definitely more.
Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities for women to step up and do that. I think because women are the natural architects of the future. We're the caregivers, we're nurturers, we give birth, we determine the population essentially. But one of the things that you mentioned in regards to business, one of the things that disappoints me is I see a lot of women in very influential positions that have the mentality that they had to struggle for it, so therefore every woman that follows them has to too.
Yeah.
And that has to change.
Totally.
That mentality that it was hard for me, so therefore it needs to be hard for you. That's just not confined to women as well. I mean, men do that as well. But I believe, and as Leisel was saying, that we need to support and nurture each other's development and be more empathetic, because I know women tend to forgive but never forget, and I think it's really important that we actually learn to forgive, and that enables us to detach from the past. It's an empowering position. And then for you, building authenticity, which builds trust and makes things a lot easier. Women just have the opportunity to be more nurturing and supportive of other women. I think we just need to embrace that a lot more. But it all starts with the self, because women are their own worst critic as well. We're so hard on ourselves, and then we tend to project that onto others around us as well. So it all starts with turning the mirror on ourselves and going, what is it that I expect of myself? And it was interesting talking about social media. I get sometimes a little bit disappointed about the way that women present themselves in social media, because I think, well, where did you think that was actually a good idea to strip off and be on the cover of Stab magazine, which is a soft porn surfing magazine? Like, what is it that you're aspiring to achieve from doing that? So it all comes down to your own value system, what it is that you expect of yourself, what your own values are, which are governing your behaviours, which are driving the outcomes that you're creating, and then how that's influencing other people. What is the legacy that you're creating based on those behaviours that you're perpetrating? How is it that you want to be remembered? Question back there.
How you going, guys? I've been coaching girls soccer for 8 years, and I've educated myself throughout the world, Europe, the States, and here in Australia. I've probably spent about 50 grand educating myself. The FFA in the last 2 years have gone through a restructuring process, which is great. And now there's a real push to get female coaches into the National Premier League for boys and for girls. But they don't have to meet the same coaching requirements as what I would. So they can do a basic coaching level and coach at the same level as me, but I've spent 50 grand educating myself. And I just wanted to know what your opinion is on that.
Are they doing that to encourage more women to get into the coaching roles?
I suppose so. I suppose there's some sort of KPI that the FFA want to meet, and they want female coaches, as does everyone. But my fear is the actual quality, that just because you're a female, that you come in because we need to meet a certain number. But I have a fear for female development football, that they're not going to get the right coaching from the right person.
There's no quota panel up here, or is there?
Well, I mean, I think if it's some sort of affirmative action, if there's a man and a woman with the same qualifications and you're trying to redress the imbalance, you would choose the woman coach. I'm okay with that, if they've got the same qualifications, because the message that sends, and, you know, women have to be visible. I mean, we want to see women coaching, and it shows us that you can do it, and it creates pathways. But I think I would prefer it if they had the same qualifications to bring to the table. I mean, when Peter Searle got the job with St Kilda, she got that on merit, but the outcry, was ridiculous, that she got it just because she's a woman. People sort of forgot that she took the Darebin Falcons to 5 consecutive premierships. She played footy, she's a teacher, she had all the qualifications and she got the job on merit. But I'm not au fait with that, so I can't say any more, I don't think.
There's a couple of questions down here.
Thanks for the presentation today. I was interested in a comment before Angela was hinting about the culture of sport in Australia, in this country, and all of you will have travelled widely overseas, and I was wondering if there'd been things that you'd seen in other countries where perhaps the culture of sport was different and could give us some positive lessons here in Australia.
I think in particular the US do swimming very well. Their head coach was a woman for a while, and purely on merit, talking about that coaching thing before, a lot of female coaches, their balance is a lot better, and their female coaches are better. They're very highly skilled. In my personal opinion, the US have done it the best. That's just purely in swimming, so, and in my opinion. I think they're much more balanced than Australians. So
I think if you just look at the performance of athletes from around the world and how they're celebrated, that's an indication of the cultural beliefs and the foundation of support that comes from those nations. So especially in swimming, right? The Americans, the Europeans, they're celebrated, they're acknowledged, they're respected, whereas the tall poppy syndrome in this country tends to keep us all down too. We play small because we don't want to be either put down or criticised or ridiculed or told that you're big-headed. I mean, I hate to draw a parallel here with a musician, but Kirk Pengilly is in the audience just here from INXS, and it was just interesting seeing how INXS, they went out and became the biggest band in the world, but when they came back to Australia, they were instantly cut down and ridiculed. So it's disappointing that culture permeates through this country, because it actually prevents us from celebrating our successes and therefore recognising them and I guess putting them up on the pedestal that they deserve to be on, and recognised and celebrated and rewarded, most importantly, for that. And that all comes down to a cultural thing. So that's something that needs to change.
From a media point of view, we can learn a lot from other parts of the world. That's what I'll say.
We might have 2 more questions, I think.
A comment and a question. Leisel, we admire your upper body strength. And the question is, how difficult was it for you to choose to do something after you quit professional sport? And not just you, Leisel also. And how difficult was it to actually implement it? Once you chose what you decided to do after?
yeah, I'm still struggling with that. So 3 years retired, I still have no idea what I want to do with the rest of my life. I tried working in a corporate office for a while. I decided that was not for me.
Why would you do that?
I know, it was for me. I'm such a big personality and I'm not very appropriate most of the time. So I would always be the person that HR would be like, hey, you can't say that here. And I was like, oh, I used to be in sport. You can say whatever you want. So, I mean, that's really hard. And everyone says it's really hard when you finish sport. And I've been asked this question a lot. And I think the pain comes from when your sport is your identity. So I've always been Leisel Jones the swimmer. I'm not Leisel Jones the partner. I'm not Leisel Jones the daughter. I'm not Leisel, I'm a swimmer. And so when you take that part away from you, I chose to, which is fine. But when you take such a big part of your life away from you, that's everything I've ever known since I was 2 years old, that's a huge hole in your life that you need to fill. And sometimes day-to-day life or a day-to-day job just doesn't fulfill you like swimming used to. And it's so hard. I mean, I used to be the best in the world at what I did, and now I'm sort of, I'm a really good grocery shopper, or I'm not very good at doing my hair, but, I'm not the best in the world at what I do anymore. And so that's really hard. So I'm still finding what it is I want to do. But I know I want to have my own business. So I'm inspired by powerful women with their own business. And I just know I want to be a boss lady. So that's my aspiration in life. That's what I really, really want. And so I'm going to go out and do that next.
Okay, Leisel, it's normal what you're going through. I
Yeah,
can guarantee
totally,
you that.
yeah.
I've been retired 6 years, and I am just finding what it is that I want to do.
You're still a good boss lady, though.
I am. Well, I'll always be my own boss.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm a control freak, so
Yeah.
I like to be in control. But I can't work for anybody. I'm unemployable. But
I realised I am too.
Yeah. But the thing is that the valuable lesson that I've learned from all of this is what you do is not who you are.
That's exactly
And I
right.
find that a lot of people within any organisation in any industry tends to, if they define themselves by what they do, then you'll never be good enough. You'll never do enough. So also understand, you've got to be, when you choose to retire and you've lost that sense of belonging and that sense of definition, you've got to be realistic about what the life that you live. So I'm never going to be able to stand on a podium in a bikini with a trophy above my head and be sprayed with champagne ever again, unless I just try to do it at home.
Recreate it.
I could recreate it. I've got 7 trophies. Kirk can spray champagne. I'll be set, right?
Just
What
doing your
you and
birthday
Kurt
every
get
year.
up to in your own time is your own business.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay, we'll keep it clean. It's PG, it's a Disney Channel, right? Yeah. But the thing is, you just have to be realistic about what your expectations are and be grateful for that. So whenever you're going through challenges, if every day you can just find 3 things that you're grateful for, it actually stops and puts a stop to the negative spiral, which ends up in depression, and then we both know where that alludes to. So it's really important that you just keep things in perspective, and if you don't have the capacity to do that, then make sure you've got people in your life that keep things in perspective for you. And do something for yourself each day that keeps your life in balance and in perspective. I'm very fortunate that my career and my profession is also a lifestyle, so I still get to surf every day. The tan's real, I hate to say it, but it's something that I dream about, it's something that I live to do, and it's something that keeps my life in perspective, so much so that if I'm grumpy or if I'm depressed or I've lost perspective, Kirk tells me, go surfing. And that's a really good thing to have.
We're technically out of time, but I know we had one questioner at the front here who was waiting, so we'll do one quick last question.
Thank you. I subscribe to The Age, and each time I undo it, I'm just horrified at the number of pages that are devoted to AFL, and I think it's NFL, the rugby from Sydney, and...
That's NRL.
What is it?
NRL, the National Rugby League.
NRL, right.
I'm a fan.
Page after page, I can't believe it. Is there any way through that?
Oh, gosh, that's a big question to end on. I love AFL. I'll declare that up front. Look, it will take time because women journos and male journos are pushing other stories, but you've got to convince, in my case and on the ABC News, a producer that story should belong in that sports segment. With ABC News, sport could be 4 minutes or 8 or 12 minutes, and often stories about women's sport would just drop off the edge if you ran out of time during the bulletin. I suspect a similar thing happens in the newspaper world, that other stories are pitched, but with our huge appetite for AFL and NRL and cricket and soccer, it's really difficult for women. And unfortunately, women's sport spikes every 4 years when it's, the Matildas do well and the netballers do well at the World Championships and everything's great. And then it tapers off. And there are many reasons for that. And
The violence.
No, I don't think so. I think that the AFL has become less violent, and it has evolved as it should, and the NRL, I think as well, has evolved.
Yes.
And it has to keep. It's got
Soccer
to try and
players
keep
have taken it way too far.
Yeah.
Now they're throwing themselves on the ground. So, yeah. Can I ask you, what would you like to read about?
Oh, I would like to read about, female cricket. And
Women's cricket.
Yes.
tennis always.
Yes, tennis.
Enjoy that so much.
Write to the paper and tell them.
Yes.
Well, the Big Bash League is starting for women in December, and it's a really important step on their road to professionalism. So what I could say to all of you and to urge you is to go out and watch women's sport, watch it live, watch it on TV, make a bit of noise about it, and then you'll see it reflected in the media.
Yeah.
You've got to go and watch it. And half the battle is getting people to watch women's sport. Once you see Meg Lanning bat live, all those myths and preconceived ideas about women not being able to do that will be blown away. You know, you've got to get out there and support women's sport.
Just very quickly before we go, Leisel has something very exciting happening tomorrow night. Do you want to just tell us about that?
Media release today, I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So...